even if someone had come and told me that bro, take $10 million and build something else, like say build let's say build a food delivery startup, and you have a clear road to 100 million in funding and all that, I couldn't have done it. Like I won't do it.
Why so?
Because I just love hardware. Like I'm just doing it out of the sheer love of building things, right? There isn't anything else I would rather be doing. Like if it's not this, then I'd probably go on to build a smartwatch, or I'll build a
I feel DARPA just doesn't get enough credit. I mean, they have incubated so many like revolutionary I feel they're like the Apple of like whatever the government system is. Like I mean, I think internet came from DARPA. Self-driving was actually incubated from DARPA. So many projects that I think GPS also was GPS also was incubated by DARPA. I mean, DARPA nobody talks about DARPA.
Young company, when we are looking at can I invest into deep technology, for you to have access to I feel only the best talent has to work on it. The best talent is sitting overseas.
Is there a market for robotics in India?
As of today, straightforward, I would say.
In this episode, I get a chance to speak with Pranav Srinivasan. Pranav is a co-founder at Accio Robotics. Accio is a pioneer in warehouse automation systems. Pranav has been in the robotics space since 2019. So we sit and discuss a lot on the differences between starting, let's say, a software company versus a hardware company, what it takes to fundraise for a robotics startup, the talent problem in India when it comes to robotics, where China and the US are when it comes to the robotics landscape, and much more. I had a great time recording this with Pranav, and I hope you guys find it useful. With that, my friends, Pranav Srinivasan.
I'll draw a parallel here to B2B SaaS. Generally, what I've heard is like B2B SaaS, there is generally not a big market for B2B SaaS in India, or even the players who are playing in B2B SaaS generally like to prefer to sell to, let's say, the US market because there is a lot of money there. Is it the same for robotics? My question is is there a market for robotics in India?
Yeah, so I think that is like a yes and no kind of question, because as of today, straightforward, I would say no. But is there going to be a market in the future? For sure. And the reason is simple. Like when we think about robots and when we think about what their essential goal is, it's mostly tied down to how can you fit into a place where humans can't perform a particular task. So if it's let's say lifting something very heavy, or if it's something to do with going to a very dangerous location, like examining, like say a nuclear plant or something like that, or a very high thermal fluctuation,
mines and all that,
where human access there is a danger aspect involved to human access. This is, as of today in India, most of these places still use a lot of human intervention, and we are okay with it at this point. But if you see, let's say if you take like in our market, basically warehousing, you have forklift operators moving pallets, right? A human driving a forklift to there. So you have machinery that's been built on how to move heavy material. But as such, the problem with robotics today is we don't, because of the amount of let's say labor that is available from the human capital standpoint in India, it's not easy for a automation company like us or a robotics company like us to justify an ROI for a B2B client immediately.
I had that in my mind as well, where in India the labor is so cheap. And there are just so many 1.4 billion of population, and most of them are in their 30s or in the range of 30s. That's a huge problem. Is it?
It is definitely a huge problem, because most of the clients that we work with today, the comparison is directly for them. Again, it has to be a business case. It's like, I think we are past that phase where India, I think in 2015 to 18-19 had this phase where we would just deploy automation or robotics for the sake of it, because of the fancy nature to it, but it's not necessarily guaranteeing any fungible outcome to the customer. So that was a problem, or that was something that gave that initial spike. But after COVID, one thing that our B2B customers especially are very aware of is the impact that COVID had on their operations, and can automation kind of offset a little bit of it. But that being said, still the comparison for ROI is with the human labor. Like how much human labor are you going to replace, and what is the value to it? We've still not gotten to a situation where a lot of these non-straightforward, like say for example pilferage, right? How much does a warehouse really lose in terms of theft or in terms of just spoiled goods, which automation can otherwise solve? These are still not things that are actively taken into calculations from a ROI standpoint. So we are still at that phase where we are competing with humans, but I can also see trends and emerging markets where that is slowly phasing out, but that's still like I think 5 to 7 years down the line. So for a young company like us, our goal again is how do we stay alive till that point to capitalize?
I had the same thing in my mind. Like, will you be able to be, because it's in the future, will you be able to be solvent for like...
Yeah, so that is where there has to be a short-term and a long-term plan. The short-term plan has to be selling abroad. I think very aligned to B2B SaaS in that sense that most robotics companies in India today have a primary market that is already settled abroad, but the core capability, at least if you look at the economic evolution standpoint, but we are still creating the talent for robotics in the country. Like say if we don't have these robotics companies working out of India, so in our case, right, we are pretty sure that the moment, like, if we move our base out of India, we are going to get a lot more opportunities, a lot more investment capabilities and investment options and all of that. But the difference would be that we would not be building capability and we would not be building the whole value chain in India, which we at Accio really want to do. That how do we build from India for a global market? So right now we're still in that process of building capability of building robots first and then go into building the market. So now we still want to sell abroad. There are still emerging markets that are closer to home, like UAE or Australia. We don't everything doesn't have to happen in the US or doesn't have to happen in the Europe. So those are still potential use cases for us now. And now with the trade war with China and all the negative sentiments with China globally and driven by the US, we are also slowly starting to see as India, robotics companies are also going to have that advantage.
One thing I was thinking about when you mentioned that, again, I think staying close to that B2B SaaS analogy is we have seen a decent amount of success, and at least in B2B SaaS, I mean Freshworks, Zoho, stuff like that, and a few other companies, maybe whatever your picks are. But in robotics, at least intuitively, like you made the economic case for it as well, right? Like at least the way I understood it, like the labor is cheap here. I mean, engineering talent is cheap here. So it should be like feasible for a startup to kind of make a product, and maybe like when you compete head to head with, let's say, the US players, just because of the economic, we should have kind of seen a few breakthrough players, which I don't think we have. Is that a fair argument? Or
yeah, it is definitely a fair argument. We don't have as many as we should be having, or as like we've had in B2B SaaS, but also that goes to show a couple of things. One is our ability to innovate in hardware in the country is very new. Like I would say it's not more than 13-14 years old. Like if you're looking at considering like a company like Aether just IPO'd, right? They're 13 years ish old, and that is the quality of talent. Also, that's how long we've been building these things. Like in robotics, the pilots are gray orange. You have other bigger companies as well, like Adverb and all of that, slowly coming up. But to compete globally, if you look at the talent pool that you're talking about, right, we have historically had a really great manufacturing, production, and service talent in the country. But if you're talking about R&D and core IP creation, that is probably talent that's only been going for the last 6-7 years. And to create genuinely valuable IP globally, it takes its time, right? There is a gestation period. Like it's still very difficult. We're seeing so many humanoid robotics companies coming up globally. We're seeing a lot of innovation happening in this space, in AI, starting from like VLMs to hardware, reinforcement learning for control and all of that. But India is so far away with all this. One of the primary reasons is talent, right? We don't have a really great higher education program yet in the country. So most of us end up leaving to really great programs abroad, right? So when you're not able to hold that talent, it's not easy to go into that deep technology breakthroughs that other countries are already probably at the forefront of. Like if you take a country like China, or if you take most of the European, so let's draw parallels, right? Like if you're looking at a lot of instrumentation devices and a lot of actuation motors, right? China has ecosystem for all of it, but you'll find a lot of this in the Europe. You'll find a lot of the software, like the core AI, happening in the US. But in India, we have been a services and a manufacturing, like we've cracked automobile manufacturing. We have our A game automobile players, but still this side of the coin, we slowly have aerospace taking its toll, like taking its shape the moment ISRO started opening up and private sector is really starting to boom. So I think we are on that uptrend. It's fair that we still don't have major players, but that is mostly been because of market conditions not being favorable over the last decade for multiple reasons. Talent, the market itself existing to sell these products, and also the capability of producing these products in India. So I think all of these together have been, and also capital flowing into it, of course. So all of these together have been the challenge that we've been facing, and I think slowly we are phasing it out. We're definitely on the uptrend. So I'm very optimistic that in the next 5 years we're going to have some very great companies coming up from India. Yeah.
I feel like there's just so much catching up to do. Do you think we might? Is there a chance that Chinese companies or US companies will so dominate the space? I mean, I was looking at like demos from Unitree and I think Figure and all that. I mean, by the time I think we get there, their cost of producing the next robot will be so cheap. By the time we reach their technological level and start to compete with them, I mean, they will be like so far ahead that it becomes really difficult for us to, even though we have maybe some economic advantage or stuff like that, it becomes very difficult for us to compete. Do you see that scenario playing out, or am I getting something wrong here?
No, I don't think that scenario will play out, and I'll tell you the reason. Like if you take a company like Figure, right? It's just that, okay, the founders had the right vision and the company is built out a human in the last 2 years. Yes, immense amount of capital has gone into it, and there is a really great team that was like, if you look at Figure's initial team filled with people from Tesla's and SpaceX, and like you had people that had genuine experience of delivering these products in the past. Their CTO has been building humanoids from 2010, right? So that's the kind of, even before humanoids were a thing, right? There has been investment going on starting from DARPA and all of that. So in India, we are seeing those things playing out where we have it kind of mostly ties down to, I think, the ecosystem evolution, where I feel in the next 5 years there might be a situation where we have enough talent, and if the government or any, say, VC or any way of funding is flowing, let's say if we're having $300-400 million flowing into it, for us to catch up in the defense sector or for us to catch up in any of these labor intensive sectors, if humanoids do become there's still like that clout around the feasibility of a humanoid, right? Like that is still, we as an economy are not capable of dealing with that uncertainty. Like, for example, one of the biggest problems with the humanoid, the technology itself, I'll tell you, is how are you going to consider safety, right? Like tomorrow, if my humanoid is going to be working in a factory along with a worker, and today if I'm building a mobile robot, like what we do at Accio is primarily focus on mobile robots, there is a lot of compliance and safety that goes behind, okay, if there is a LiDAR in the front and if the motor has to shut down, there's a direct cut off to the motors, and even if my onboard computer stops working, the robots still stop and you're not going to harm anyone. But if that robot stops working and falls on a worker and it's weighing 80 kgs, 150, 200 kgs, how are you factoring in the safety aspect? So there are still execution level pieces left to solve there. But now as a country, we are not a country with abundance. We are still a country that is creating abundance. Now, do we take those risks of something that is not proven in the market yet? Is a huge ballgame, I think, and when the time is right, we'll catch up. Like, it's just that now we are building the talent and there'll be that sudden inflection point, I feel, over the next 5 years, where we'll have enough people, we as an ecosystem will know how to build hardware. Like, that's something we are learning. The country will learn how to build hardware. We're building our own motors now. We have to start making our own cells. We're doing it in small capacity. Semiconductor fabs are coming up. So it's a matter of just scaling those things, and then there'll be a sudden inflection point is what I feel. The only place where I'm worried about from that sense is the defense sector. And the defense sector, if you look at the kind of investment and the kind of applications that are already being built globally, we are probably lagging behind there. But again, if at all, let's say the government comes up tomorrow and is like, okay, let's take 3 years and we're investing maybe around $500 million to just beef up our defense, there is still something that can be solved. But is that need going to come? It won't come. It's not something that we'll want to do till the need comes, because we have other places to invest in as an economy for us to move forward. But if you see in the US, that's what's happening. Like, there is billions of dollars. China's government is funding a lot of these companies to keep them afloat. Like, now tariff problems are there, the government is investing. So it is more about priority. Like, for us today, similar to what we are seeing in LLMs probably, like we're probably not building our own models, but now the government is like, okay, let's commission a couple of companies or one company to invest some capital, build our own model for India, and then solve Indian problems. Like, our problems are more vernacular, our problems are more related to our existence. So and there are a lot of emerging markets in India also which require automation that are coming up, which we might slowly start seeing. Like, for example, healthcare is definitely, like if you're looking at surgery, right, that's definitely something that can be like a good starting point. So there are those markets where robots can enhance human efficiency, which we will still capitalize and we'll continue to capitalize. So there are companies building robots for scavenging. Now, scavenging is a very, manual scavenging is a very, very tedious process, and most states have said no to it. So now robots to do that is a easy switch. So there are, again, defense is one more thing. So I think we'll find our way. I feel like I think as a country, we are very confused at this point. We are in that adolescent phase. We'll find our way on what is the right things to invest in. PLI schemes are coming up. We'll figure it out. Is at least my optimistic outlook to it.
Yeah, I chuckled when you said $500 million government budget. I mean, I think Anduril has raised probably more than.
Anduril has raised more than that. But I'm saying at least to add up, like you said, right, if you have the human resource, and then we are able to, there's a full ecosystem built around. This I'm talking about only R&D. Then there's an ecosystem built around manufacturing. We should be able to crack it.
There is no Anduril for India, right? I mean,
I don't think there's no Anduril for India. There are a lot of companies. So again, DRDO had launched this IDEX program, which was similar to trying to mimic DARPA in a very rudimentary sense, that okay, can we get new startups and college labs to build out tech for defense? But it's still like catching up, and there are some companies building some interesting things in that space, but still not an Anduril equivalent for sure.
Honestly, I feel DARPA just doesn't get enough credit. I mean, they have incubated so many revolutionary soft. I feel they are like the Apple of like whatever the government system is. Like, I mean, I think internet came from DARPA, self-driving was actually incubated from DARPA. So many projects that I think GPS also was GPS also was incubated by DARPA. I mean, DARPA nobody talks about DARPA, but I mean
DARPA, and you'll see a lot of now the current CTOs of like a lot of the bigger companies who are all part of DARPA, or like professors working with DARPA, like on various research projects in different labs across the country. If you see, one of the major contributors to DARPA again was all the education institutes.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I feel a lot of our problems lie in higher education, because there's a reason why even today if you go to a lot of these top robotics companies, you will find a lot of Indians. Like, I have a lot of my friends working in a lot of very cool robotics companies, solving great problem statements there, which they could ideally be doing in India if you had the right bed, right? If you had the right development ecosystem. So somewhere, I think I'll tell you what we are not talking about in India is the lack of that great higher education pipeline to hold talent back. Like today, for really good people to stay in India and then work out of it, even if you have startups and the opportunities for startups, why should those people be here if I can go abroad and build something, is the answer that I think we are still not too focused on. I hope like we start throwing light on that at some point, and we are able to address that, but I feel that will solve a lot of our root cause problems.
Honestly, I want to push back there. I mean, I'm not even convinced if I feel even if the opportunities are there, right? I mean, if you're working in, let's say, Mumbai or Bangalore, I mean, you look at the city around you. I mean, it's filthy. I mean, I'm not sure if you get like a good job, right? I don't know if people if they're making 60 lakhs here, and even if they get 70 LPA in in US. Sorry, even if they get like 40 LP in US, I think they would prefer like a much cleaner place with like more like clean environment.
I think that'll probably boil down to priorities. Yeah, your point is like very valid. The cities are becoming slowly unlivable. Yeah. That is definitely there. But that again, it's like a chicken and egg problem. You want to hold those people back to solve the city problems as well. Yeah. And you want like, and you need to give them a good working condition as well. So it's a kind of chicken and egg problem. I feel like at least the starting point can be education. Like now for a person, if you go through a journey of a person moving abroad, right? You're also taking on a lot of other risks. It's not just all rosy from that perspective of the city being clean, right? You're taking on the risk of, if it's a loan, you're taking on that loan on your shoulders. Now immigration, you're going to another country. This is not your place. So the immigration, you're still liable, you're still responsible. You're not 100% welcome there, right? So that's always running on your mind. So how are you going to get to do your best work of, like, say you want to run a company, right? You want to have the freedom. Maybe it might be the backing of your family. Maybe it might be the backing of like you just being aware of your city or your friends being there. All of this together, it also gets very difficult to solve this, run a company, do something innovative in an environment abroad.
That's the sad part, right? I mean, the people who are most equipped to kind of stay here, and because my guess is here, anyone who migrates, let's say, to the US or anywhere else, is generally like upper middle class or like, strong middle class. I mean, if your parents' income is like if your parents are not making enough money to send you somewhere, you're coming from a economically unprivileged background. Yeah. So the people who are most equipped to kind of have the luxury and resources to kind of, do something about those problems are the ones who are like, kind of like leaving or rightfully so maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, I think it is so I took this decision very consciously to stay back, for example, even though, like, if you look at, even though the passion is for hardware, robotics and all of that, and the ecosystems are way better abroad, it was a very conscious decision to spend time in India and do it. But like you mentioned, right, the ecosystem around it does make you question, like, okay, was this a decision that maybe should be rethought?
I wanted to ask you that. I mean, if you knew what you know now, would you have actually gone ahead? Did you actually know what you know right now? I mean, about the market, and because when you...
Yeah, no, I don't think I had enough information when we started. I don't think I would have moved abroad, but I would have definitely started off with abroad being the primary market, but still built out of here, because there is still that. So when we started, at least Accio, like, the passion was only about building hardware. So our first project was a device for visually impaired people. So there's always an intention of, like, building. The impact was like a very core center of how we started the company. Like, how do you create impact? So creating that impact of jobs, good talent, and building technology, IP, creating IP in the country was a very important puzzle. Not just about the money and how much our comfort was. Because honestly, if it was about money and comfort, more than moving abroad, my other decision would have been to start a SaaS company or a software play, because there your gestation phases are lesser. Like, I wouldn't get into hardware, right? If that was the focus more than before leaving the country, that would be my first switch.
Smart move.
Yeah, that would have been my first switch of, like, going to a more, okay, let me be financially stable, let me get all of the other things sorted, build something that has faster iterations, not like something that takes 6 months to iterate and then next version and then get to product. So that would have been the first thing. So that might have been maybe a brand or like a specific. So before we started, my co-founder and we had even brainstormed of plant-based milk back in 2019, 2020. That should we build plant. Now you see a lot of brands doing plant-based milk, but we didn't do it at plant or take any non-dairy form of
Plant-based milk, is
milk,
it?
yeah, non-dairy form. We just pondered over like what all ideas do we want to get into, because we had started straight out of college, so there was not enough context of the world. So we had to build that, and so we're like, okay, why don't we look at non-dairy alternatives of milk? Even before it was a very common thing today. Like today, you get almond milk, you get all of that, and it's a normal thing in any cafe that you go to.
Were you at least aware of when you got out of college about the B2B market in itself? I'm asking you this because when I graduated from college, honestly, I swear to God, I did not even know that there was something called B2B. Like I thought whenever somebody started a company, right, it was generally like all the ideas that we were thinking about were all consumer. Like, how do we build an app?
No, I think that we were aware of because so during college itself, one of the primary things was to work in different startups. So from working in different robotic startups that are bootstrapped, then startups that are funded, talking to other founders. So I think how the market split up, we had some familiarity there, thanks to I think maybe other people that we were in touch with. But what I was not aware of, how difficult it would be to sell in the B2B market. Like, okay, a sales cycle is longer. It's going to take 6 months to close a deal, and then you need to manage cash flows accordingly. You're not probably going to sell. So other things about iteration, right? Say if I'm building this mic, I can easily build out 10 to 20 prototypes and go talk to 500 customers easily, rather than going and if it's a B2B product, then I'm maybe working with one anchor customer, and then you only need to rely on their feedback, because getting through to multiple of these huge legacy companies or like any B2B company is very difficult. So you can't really talk to hundreds of these companies before deciding what your product form factor has to be, which you can do for a consumer product. So I feel sometimes as a creator, I feel a consumer product would have been fun, because my iterations and my feedback from the customer would have been easier. But that being said, yeah, the advantage of the B2B market is the market size and also the ability to have large ticket projects. That changes. So you can make more money with lesser margin. So what I would have changed is I would have probably gotten into the B2B market after some more experience, because I know what exact problem. If I go to a customer and like, you solve this for me, and then I get money, then for sure B2B would be like the clear cut. So that would be the learning.
I think we are sort of doing a retrospective career counseling. Retrospective career counseling now. Anyways, I want to go back to. So I'm sure you guys hire interns as well. Do you see any shift in the way people are teaching robotics back from 2019 or 2017, or is the syllabus still very shitty and they are still?
It's very sad. So very simply put, I think it is very sad, and that's one reason. Like whenever I get a chance to anyone, like we have other robotics founders as well, like who are like all part of like in and around Bangalore, HSR, and all that. We all make sure like whenever we get a chance to interact with any bunch of college kids, we take that opportunity if it's giving a talk to them and all that, because today kids, we still see a lot of kids with agency who are going out and learning by themselves. For example, they will come, so during COVID especially, I saw a lot of this, like kids that had IE agency, they would spend because classes are online, they would spend their time in our office. And whenever class are there, they just like plug it in and they're continuing the work. So they get the attendance, and so they learned a lot, right?
These kind of people must be a minority chunk, right? Or
I feel these are the people that are really interested in robotics or like aerospace, like their field. They're a minority chunk. They're definitely a minority chunk. Like it's very similar to how robotics companies. I would say it's very similar to how robotics companies are getting funded today. Like the abundance is not there of this talent, because people are still looking at engineering as a safe career option, which it is not anymore. Like for you to get employed in the right place and have that right career growth and be a little bit self-sustaining with increasing costs and all these metro cities, engineering is not your safe career choice anymore. So that way, I feel like it is still a minority, but a lot of these kids were applying.
Just to stay there, because I mean, at least on the software side, I completely agree with you. I think starting late 2024, getting a job as a computer science, getting a job as a programmer or a software engineer, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. Do you see that in other areas as well, or were you particularly talking about software engineering?
So I think in software engineering, there's a problem of abundance. The problem there is, so I think you can split engineering into two things. One is software. And the thing there is, historically, there's been incentive to take up computer science or any software course because of the salary packages. So if you're looking at, like, say, I did my mechanical engineering. So for me, whatever options I had out of college compared to, let's say, probably a person who was not as hardworking but in the computer science field on campus, the packages were obviously way different, on a different scale compared to a mechanical engineer, right? So that gave a lot of people incentive to pick up software engineering. But now what's happening is there's a lot of inflow there and not enough job opportunities as such in software today, which is probably creating in the job parity, slowly creating, where I'm seeing my friends also not getting the same packages.
I would even push like not only there's a more inflow, but also with tools like Cursor and Copilot writing. Like I think at this point, a lot of at least even if I take my own example, right? I think 80% of the code is written by Copilot, and I'm just there like watching it write. So with that, I don't know what the implications would be of people entering the market.
Yeah, I think the implications of, let's say, probably all the support environments for software, right? Probably for testing engineers, probably for like if you're looking at, so it's like whatever a 5-member team would do, you'll have like one really great engineer, two really great engineers do it. Yeah, that's definitely happening, and that kind of happens with us as well. Like we've genuinely stopped recruiting any like full stack roles at this point, because we're like, yeah, that is something that if you have one really good full stack engineer, two really good full stack, they can fulfill most of it. Like when there is R&D, then you need like more people solving it, right? So that is very valid, but the problem with hardware, if you see, is reverse. Like you don't have enough good talent. So that problem we face, but there are these my interns that you were speaking about, right, who do pick up. For these people also, why again I went back to the higher education part is we end up losing these people to not to other companies, to colleges abroad, because for them these are like really smart people. They would be able to solve really great problems. They would pick up projects by themselves, figure it out. They would make mistakes, but they'll figure it out and at the end of 6 months give you lucrative outputs. But there 2 months later I'll get a request for an LOR because they want to leave abroad because the opportunity is there. Right, you either get to work with a really great professor there, you'll either get to work, and it's mostly not. So these people I have not noticed these living conditions as a factor. Like these are people who have more looked at the career options.
No, honestly, if I may, I mean the living conditions aspect I think only comes when you're hitting 30s.
Yeah, when you're getting closer.
When you're 20s,
that's when you start thinking,
nobody gives a fuck. I mean, people could be shitting around you know, and people literally are, I think, in India. So I mean, but you don't care about.
Yeah, you don't care about it. So at least with these kids, you don't lose them to the living conditions at that phase. Maybe like you said, after 30, you start thinking about it. 30, yeah. But with them, it's mostly when you have like better research happening there, right? Like more high quality research. We are definitely like the kind of research probably happening in the country. Like let's say if there are 40% or 50% really high quality research happening in the top 20 universities in the US, you'll probably have that happening in the top 3 or 4 universities, and that too maybe it'll be only like 4 or 5%. So there have been like research like there'll be faculties that reach out to us to collaborate on some research, and their end goal would just be a paper at the end of the day. I just won't want to collaborate with those people who don't have like a really great idea, like okay, let's implement this and then there is an impact. It's just be for the sake of a research paper, and India is still in that phase. Like I think that is one major problem with talent.
Perish or publish culture, I think.
Perish or publish culture, yeah. That perish or publish culture is also dragging us down on one end of the spectrum, where nothing new really like stands out.
That's really not weird, but I mean intuitively, if you think about it, people may be sitting in Stanford. I don't know if I may take a AI example here. People sitting in Stanford, or I mean, it's just a lab of people with probably more capital. Is capital because I'm guessing that people in IIT Bombay or VIT Vellore, the caliber I feel should be at least the same. Am I missing something here? Or
no, I don't see the caliber. Capability is the same, but exposure is not. Like so, if you look at it like in IIT Bombay, like example that you gave, right? IIT Bombay, these are the same kids probably getting a Stanford or an MIT.
They're the ones going to MIT and Stanford.
Going there, right? And there's no change. That's what the caliber is there. But when you are on IIT Bombay campus, or when you are on, even though IIT Bombay is a premier institute, right? The difference I think between a Stanford and an IIT Bombay would be this: that if there are if there's a batch of 100, you would have opportunity for 70 to 80 kids in a Stanford to do high quality research and fail at it and again try at something else, and have capital and the right advisors and the right ecosystem. Like if you're in Stanford, you're like very close to Silicon Valley or close to that whole ecosystem. You are getting access to the top people in those fields immediately, right? And if you're in MIT, you're in Boston, you're in Harvard nearby. So you have those ecosystems built up there, and you probably have like 70 to 80 people out of the 100 people cohort working on cutting edge stuff. But in an IIT Bombay, out of the 100 people, you still have opportunity to do that because there are still some really good professors, but that will probably be 10 people or 5 to 10 people. That is the difference. But the moment these remaining 80 people in IIT Bombay head to a Stanford or an MIT based on their credentials built over here, they would have access to those and they would then start building that. That's at least what I see, yeah.
I'm not even sure how many, again going back to AI itself, because I'm more familiar with the field. I don't even know like how many professors, even let's say let's target IT Bombay, right? I don't know really how much contribution have professors from IT Bombay made to AI, at least. I don't think any, because at least I've not read any papers which were from, let's say, IT Bombay or professors from IT Bombay where they have made a contribution and, it has, people have talked about that contribution or people have used that or cited that.
I mean, that again might not be just the professors thing. That might be the capital part again, because even if you have like a really great professor, and I'm not too sure about, I've not gone through enough papers from India to understand what's the quality, so maybe I don't know if there's good quality or bad quality from any of these. There I think capital also plays a problem, like for you to have a GPU cluster, access to it easily, suddenly, like even if you talk about AI, right, it's only something that in India we've started, it's become a common word only after GPT.
Correct.
But the truth is OpenAI has been doing it from 2016. You have so many other people that have been building generative AI for a very long time right now in the US. So today, when even for a professor in India, sitting in India, for them to even think about in 2015, 2016, even if they were capable and they were building cutting edge stuff in India, right? Like if I don't remember the professor's name, like if you look at Arvind Srinivasan, right, Perplexity's founder. So yeah, so he has very high regard for his IIT Madras professor who introduced him to AI at that point, because he was the pioneer in IIT Madras who was working on it. So he still had high regard for him. So but at that point, for even a professor like that to maybe have access to the same amount of compute, the students and the PhD scholars to help him out to build like a really great, whatever the product might have been, was not something that India could foresee, right? So that was also used for now when you're looking at GPT is there, then suddenly we have all these pop-ups coming over everywhere. It's AI, everyone wants to use AI, but it's been a post GPT era. I don't think, if let's say, if my theory is that if OpenAI had taken another route, that we are only going to focus on AGI, we have all the capital coming in, we are not going to launch anything like OpenAI, nothing like that. I'm not sure if this same kind of adaptation would have really transpired, because OpenAI decided I will build a consumer product today. Parallelly, we are building AGI and we are raising billions of dollars for that. But this is and suddenly in 2028, when if say 2028, 2030, whenever AGI happens, then we'll all wake up and be like, yeah, maybe AGI is the thing to do. Because so I think that AI would have still remained a developer conference topic rather than a common family topic.
It's also difficult to imagine Arvind doing what he's doing if he actually had stayed in Madras and then come to Bangalore, and I don't think so.
It would be in Berkeley, like the kind of people, and then he got a chance to intern at OpenAI, work at OpenAI.
Yeah, I think he worked at DeepMind as well.
Yeah, he worked at it, and so all of this ecosystem is what I think India is still creating, right? Your initial concern of will we be too far ahead is definitely a risk, but I think we'll figure out our own way to thrive with, because one advantage that India has is we have our own people and our own problems. So even if we bring the technology in and we are able to really funnel it for our applications, right, I think we still can find like a decent enough economic growth and then support. But what is that structure going to be? That's something that.
But if I understand you correctly, talent is a major issue for. Has there actually been a case where you guys will be working on some problem, or there are some problem statements where you're just not able to find the right talent who has maybe experience in these things, or is that an actual day-to-day issue? Or
so one of the reasons I tell you at Accio we don't go too deep into AI for this reason, because of the right access to talent. So I have just formed this opinion that after talking to multiple people, and also the young journey of a young company and all that, like when we are slowly scaling, we're even though we are like 5 years old now, but it's still like product market fit and all of that is still something that we're figuring out. Now as a young company, when we are looking at, can I invest into deep technology for you to have access to I feel only the best talent has to work on, and the best talent is sitting overseas. So I don't want to immediately start investing in AI today, because till we have like maybe $10-15 million at disposal, it's difficult to create that disruption. But if let's say as a company, like there are a lot of AI companies coming up now, if your core focus is AI, then it makes sense, because all your founding team, everyone's core focus is just that how do you disrupt this particular use case using whatever language model, open source models, whatever. But for me to build anything in robotics, let's say now in India, I think I really doubt, I have not spoken to a lot of my colleagues in the robotics space about their developments in software over the last 3-4 months. But there are people working on VLMs. VLMs are basically vision language models, which are basically for robots to see something, convert that to language, and then change that to action for the robot to do something. Now that is what is the AI equivalent. That is the LLM equivalent for robotics. Now I don't know if a lot of my Indian colleagues, are there companies yet working on VLMs in India today? Like you'll see a lot of these humanoids come up, like they have like semi-humanoids. Very few companies are actually solving the core tech problem. Like you have I can probably count 3 to 4 companies that are looking, but there are a lot of companies using the same ones for as a receptionist equivalent, where you just have a tablet and you see it and all of that. But that's still not like way far away from robotics. Like that's still something that you can do with simpler.
I wouldn't even classify that as robotics. I
Yeah.
think it's just an iPad on the.
Yeah, iPad on this thing. So you have some human interaction element to it, and but if you're looking at core robotics in manufacturing, right? Okay, a company, if you're talking about, is anyone, there are companies building models for vision where, okay, can I manipulate different, those things are happening, and it's taken them so much time sitting in India to build that out. But if you look at the US, right, the number of open source models being contributed, US and Europe, number of open source models being contributed for starting from reinforcement learning for control systems to going to very complex end actions in VLMs and VLAs. Like you have open source models from a company like Hugging Face, you have open source models like even Meta has their own vision models for segmenting, which are all complicated computer science, like, or computer vision problems 3-4 years back, to just distinguish and segment, okay, this is a mic and this is something else in a crowd. Those are things that AI is making better. But I doubt India, there is like going to be that volume. Like it's more like you send a lot of data into something and the best things come out. Like there are good eggs and bad eggs. It's just that I feel US or like a market abroad is just throwing so many darts at the problem that you will succeed with 3 or 4 of those darts. In India, you have way lesser darts being thrown at it, but so our probability of success on these kind of problem statements is also way lower. Yeah.
How much of like robotics in general, not only maybe Accio, but in general, how much of it is it actual software play? Is most of it software play, or how would you classify that?
Yeah, I think it'll vary depending on problem statement. For example, if you're looking at warehousing, right, today, warehousing is still like a form factor play where hardware becomes a key puzzle. Like in a warehouse, you have more repetitive tasks to do than very ad hoc or edge cases coming up. Like you have, if it's a robot, I need to move from point A to point B, right? I have very defined paths to get there and I need to go there. So there's no, there are not a lot of human robot collaborative aspects that come in today. Yeah, when human robot collaboration comes in, then you need some AI coming into that. So that aspect is definitely there. But then let's say you go more upstream, right? If you are going more into consumer robotics, then you need a lot more software. Let's say vacuum cleaners, right? What is the thing that will make vacuum cleaners more better than what a Roomba already has? It's a combination of software and hardware. Software, computer vision will play a key role. Then all the algorithms that you're using to process the data will play a key role. So then it becomes a software and hardware play. But as of today, I think it's still in India, it's still majorly looked at as a hardware play.
And how difficult, I'm sure you attend a few founder meetups and all that. How different is the life of a hardware founder as opposed to, let's say, a software founder? In what ways is it different and all that?
The difference, I think, is primarily patience. Like, so the problem for us is hardware risk is higher, right? Obviously, like for a VC today or anyone, if they are investing X amount of rupees into a hardware company, for a hardware company, that money 40 to 50% of that will go just into hardware and R&D, and the remaining 50% is for the talent and all the other things that come into actually running a company. For a software sales and all that, but for a software company, 100% of that is going into your team and your ops, your any data centers or whatever you need to set up. It's all going into that. But for a hardware company, you have all the risks involved. So today, for us to convince any kind of capital allocator to support us, it's a harder sell, and I think it's justified sell also, because India doesn't have a lot of hardware successes yet. It's also about all the hardware founders putting their stepping up and being like, okay, we are going to deliver, right? And that's when the capital is also going to start coming.
Does that make it easier though? Because easier relatively, obviously, in a sense that because there are hardware in general is considered hard, right? Like any random person looking at starting a business is generally, his first instinct is not going to be starting a hardware company because of, like, one is this technical expertise. Second is even if you know, you have to find a team that knows. So there are a lot of, I feel like, a barrier to, like, maybe artificial barrier to entries as well. That should make it easier, right? Because in the sense that because there are so few players, does it make it easier to, like, raise funding because there's not many people attempting to do this?
No, I think there are, like, if you look at the critical, like, so if you look at the critical mass of people entering into the hardware space, right? Fundraise is not a function of, oh, there are too many people to fund and I want to fund only. So it's not like no investor has said that I'm not funding you because I'm funding that rocket company. That's not been the problem at all. The problem has been just that first the market validation, right? So PMF takes time. product market fit for a hardware company takes time, because one, like for this mic to work this way, there's been so many iterations of it to get to this form factor for the company to start spending on, or that factory to start spending on finish and all of that. It has its own gestation phase. Now for a VC or any capital allocator to go through the gestation phase is a very personal or a thesis that they follow. So the problem has primarily been, one, for these people itself, how much capital do they have access to allocate into different hardware companies is a challenge. So then they have to pick the very few ones that would be probably the top 5 to 10% of hardware companies, because you'll see a lot of these hardware companies also just dying off in their incubators. Right? Incubator, it's easy to raise a 30 to 50 lakh grant. You go build a proof of concept, and then are you going to start? When are you going to commercialize? What's happening? And I think one other from a hardware. Now that we've spoken about the market side of things, I'll talk about from hardware founders' perspective. I feel hardware founders' perspective, one big problem is also, we are building hardware, like you said, your first instinct for a business not to build hardware. Your first, if you want to build, like say you found a consumer gap, your first instinct for that product would be go to China, find it easier, and that's how you create a business. You can create a cash flow, at least for the business, where you go to China, find the product, find a manufacturer where the technology is already solved, and you create a marketing agency to sell that properly over here. Is how consumer hardware companies, at least in India, are start out, and then eventually they graduate to their own technology and their own IP and all of that once there is the market is validated. But most hardware players, I think, that are working on deep tech, right? Something that happens, it's being driven sheerly out of passion before it's driven out of the market.
I didn't understand that.
So I'll take my case. Even if someone had come and told me that, bro, take $10 million and build something else, like say build, let's say build a food delivery startup, and you have a clear road to 100 million in funding and all that, I couldn't have done it. Like I won't do it.
Why so?
Because I just love hardware. Like I'm just doing it out of the sheer love of building things, right? There isn't anything else I would rather be doing. Like if it's not this, then I'd probably go on to build a smartwatch, or I'll build a smart thing. Like that's also how most hardware founders look at it today. So sometimes I feel in India that balance, right? Today the ecosystem can't support just mere passion also. It needs the market support. In the US or in other more matured ecosystems, you'll see that investors are ready to take a bet and be like, okay, you figure out something. Like if not this today, you figure out a B2B, B2C play. If the team is good and the team is like very motivated. In India, the percentage of that is lesser.
And they throw a lot of money as well, right? I mean, relatively speaking. Or
yeah, a seed round easily in the US, right? Like you will have even if I'm like, say in India, I'm building the same global product, and in the US, someone is building the same product, and we are both building it for a global audience. So the market, the total addressable market is going to remain the same for both of us. But in India, it'll be very difficult for me to raise a $1 million seed round, whereas in the US, it's going to be damn
north
easy. North of that. The trade-off for that is in India, for me, access to people is easier. For them, it's a little bit more expensive. But again, the next trade-off is you might, if your product is too complicated, you might get really good talent to solve that problem easier there than here. So picking that drawing this Venn diagram and picking the right problem to solve becomes very critical. That okay, India's ecosystem can support manufacturing. Mechanical manufacturing is something that we are good at. Can we build? We are already good at maybe building automobile parts. We are good at building. So that's why electric vehicles was easy for us to adopt. Like we have a good automobile culture in the country. We know how SOPs have to be set for production and mass scaling and of automobile and all that. So EV is still like seeing that easier adoption.
All of these might be like just a chicken and egg problem, right? Like how you mentioned, like I'm thinking like even if you have like I don't know, in the sense that even if you have like let's say a super mediocre team, but you have so much capital that you get to do like 100 experiments and then one works out.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah.
You know, you still come out ahead, right?
The other thing also, if you notice, there's one very interesting trend in the US, which maybe gives these VCs a confidence. Lot of the hardware founders today are people that have been founders in the past and have successful exits, or have some form of validation that okay, we have done something and now we are getting to the next phase. In India, we are still figuring that out. Like we still don't have a lot of great exits, right? We still don't have a lot of, we have IPOs, but we're still seeing how those things, and I'm seeing this trend as well where founders that have had successful first companies from in the last decade now want to invest in hardware, deep tech and things that are more long term. Because now they have the capital, there's confidence. Like as a market and as entrepreneurs, we are gaining that confidence. Let me build long-term plays. So that trend is also happening, right? So US already had a lot of these founders. Like you can see people that have built companies in the past now starting hardware companies or with their own money, starting with their own money and then going out and raising huge sums of capital. And even for college kids, I feel like it's easier to put money in a Stanford grad than a VIT grad. It's as simple as that, right? So now you have easier access to a Stanford grad there, and I think all those things do play a role. Yeah.
I mean, Adit also, I think, Stanford.
Stanford dropout.
Raised north of 300 million for, I don't know.
Yeah, easily. I think they easily at 500, 400.
Yeah. I mean, fundraising is also it's a skill, right? I mean,
it is a skill.
Even Kunal Shah, I think, raised more than $1 billion. I'm not sure about that, but definitely more than 500 million.
Yeah.
The skill that it takes to kind of talk to people, to take money from their pockets to put it in your pocket. I mean, that is not a joke.
It is not a joke. It's I mean, definitely the scale at which some of these companies are operating, like even if you take Zepto or
exactly,
LinkedIn,
right?
The scale at which they are operating, even if there is money,
the pressure to handle
that is like so immense that you can't just throw it on money. Like there's a genuine capability for the founders and the leadership team to really like build that out. So even I wouldn't say like like I've seen like a lot of these posts like online, right? People just starting out this all like money being flown into these startups and all of that. Even with that money, it's not straightforward to build this. Like if you draw parallels to US, right? As much as we're talking about all these success metrics, so many companies that have failed with millions, hundreds of millions.
WeWork is a classic example.
Yeah, WeWork is a classic example. And even after WeWork, Adam Newman still managed to raise so much capital for his next company, right? So I think there is still so much risk-taking capability, which has been a byproduct of the economy. Like when you have exits happening, and then when you have those founders becoming VCs, or when you so that evolution, I feel India's like my only concern with India is like the first question that you asked: is there a concern behind us being left behind? But if you ask me, are we on the right trajectory? I feel we are on the right trajectory.
Like one thing I'm surprised, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but we spoke about US a lot, but we didn't become China at all. I mean, my intuition would be, I feel at least in hardware, China is like so ahead of everybody, even the US. I feel like US probably is good at, let's say, designing or assembling all of those together. But at least in terms of like pure play hardware stuff, I think China is so ahead of so many people. I think people don't even realize it. Like, I mean...
Yeah, like I was at one point, like, so I visited China in November. At one point I was seriously contemplating that maybe I need like a small 3-member team there to really like fast track.
Were you in Shenzhen?
Yeah, I was in Shenzhen, and I'd gone to Shanghai as well. So I'd like gone to multiple cities, seen a lot of factories and what's going on and all that. The scale at which even the small operations happen is like too scary that they're definitely way far ahead. Like from their mastery over silicon is like I don't think it's going to be easy for us to ever catch up just the manufacturing might that exists. And even the cities are planned according to that, right? The cities are planned in a way where the center has a lot of your main manufacturing plants, and supply chain flows in, like it's very nicely planned out. So I feel like the whole ecosystem, why I didn't bring up China is that I'll tell you why I spoke more about US or Europe, is that China as a market is something that a Indian company can never enter. It's very complex. So
is it because of the pricing or
pricing? There's enough supply there. There are so many EV companies that we haven't heard of inside China, right? So there is enough supply there. They don't need anything from outside apart from any raw material for food or agricultural things maybe, but they don't need a lot of things inside. They're a self-surviving ecosystem almost. I mean, one exercise I want to do this month was really see what are the things that China also imports, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But if you look at, let's say, the US, right? US is a market where India is buying and selling. Like Europe is a market where we are buying and selling. So there is like two-way street, and that's why I think most companies are very wired to that. But if you look at the developments in China and what's happening, I think the kind of, it's multiple. I felt like today the state that India is in, they were in the 2000s and they were not confused. I think China was lucky to build their whole economy without social media. Like in a way, I feel that we are very confused today because there are opinions and people all over the place that you don't know what's the right thing to do. As a youth today, like in 27, at like 27, 25 to 30, what do you pursue and what do you do is a very confusing question for an Indian kid. So I think that is twofold, right? The problem is also that there's a lot of access to information. There's not access to the same kind of resources. But China probably built it out of just like, okay, we all need to work hard and we need to get to a certain point. Not that whole culture was right or whatever, but they drove it on the backs of industrialization, that we are going to search excellence and we're going to build a lot of these. China, Taiwan, like both of them, China, Taiwan, even to an extent Korea, Japan and all of these countries as well. The fact that something like TSMC only exists in Taiwan and owns so much of the semiconductor value chain is like mind-boggling. Like the fact that one company controls so much is mind-boggling, right? And okay, you have it parallel in the Europe with ASML, but these are very interesting things that this ecosystem was able to capture, and they were very focused. Like they've built it out over the last 2 decades. That I feel now is the time for us to do that.
I mean, I'm not completely sold on the social media part but I'm sold on they built their economy on like their industrial manufacturing being like the backbone. That is definitely I agree too. But social media, no, not so much, because I mean even they had their homegrown Alibabas and WeChat.
But that's not. I'm talking about 2000s. Like I'm talking about the 2000s when just that smartphones itself were not this. Like even today, like all your major smartphone providers, like all your screens and all that, you have vendors in China primarily. But the fact that connectivity was not this much. I'll erase social media probably. Connectivity was not this much. So because connectivity is a lot, sometimes even like the work-life balance debates are not like confuse me a lot. Like why do we have to worry so much about what is work-life balance? Just go about doing what is the right thing that you feel like. I think as like a 26, 27-year-old. So I just feel there's a lot of noise. Like I feel for people in the 20s today, I see like say be it my friends or people around me, or even thoughts that pop up for me, right? There is a lot of confusion around what is the right way forward.
And you think the source of that is today's social media?
Yeah, the source of that is just that you have so much access to information that you don't know how to deal with it. And the point is for you to sit and process that information. It takes a certain amount of time, right? Like you need to sit, probably write down, okay, I saw this from here, and what is exactly my core values, and I want to stick to it. It's very difficult for a person working very hard 5 to 6 days a week to process and then come up with the right attitude to deal with the problem.
I completely agree with this.
Yeah. So now this is also a problem that we are facing when we are in this growth phase.
Sorry, I want to get slightly philosophical here. In the sense that I feel all of that soul searching, or what is that? All of your like quote unquote values or what you want to do, unfortunately you kind of have to know before 21, 22, because I feel that's when you have the most amount of time. In the sense, you will not realize this. I mean, nobody realizes this, obviously, that's life. Because you have so much spare time in your college, at least it was for me. You have just so much spare time. You sit with friends and all that, which just completely goes away once you start working, right?
But the other problem is you haven't seen enough of the world at 21 to make that, yeah.
Exactly.
So somewhere just like having those core values becomes like so critical that I think today with all the fast-paced things, we read one thing here and there. People really enjoy failure stories. There is a crab mentality that exists. So all of this is like kind of, I feel like making people very confused, and we don't know what is the right direction forward. Which is what I feel is a bigger problem in India than...
Yeah, I mean, it is, right? Like, I mean, when you said that, I was thinking about when I'm on LinkedIn and if somebody's like talking about some raising, not all the time, I don't want to make it a blanket statement, but Zepto is a famous example, right? Or Cred is another, like you look at Kunal tweeting on Twitter, and the comment section will always be like, loss-making company, these motherfuckers would not even have started anything, right? And these people have the balls to like go and loss-making. Shut the fuck up, man. So and even on LinkedIn, I see a lot of comments about the topic will be something, but these people will bring their own fucking agenda and then vomit on the comment section. But you don't get to see this if let's say some US founder will raise something. The comments are generally, if not positive, at least directed at that. When Sam Altman also gets a lot of shit, but he gets a lot of shit for like, let's say, models not working or, for profit, non-profit, all that nonsense. At least it's...
The problems are more like global than like, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've seen...
I think that's also because like people, that's what. So now for a person to put, why again I tell you social media, for a person to, if you look at the psyche of a person typing a comment or like commenting on any of these things, right? First, for you to type the comment, you need information. But the problem is for you to put a comment on social media, you don't really need money. So you're just like, it's free will and you're just typing keyboard warriors, right? But now, if you go and see history, how Amazon operated, right? If you go and see the fact that today majority of Amazon's business, even though we all know Amazon.com comes from AWS than from Amazon.com. These are things that a lot of these people still don't comprehend and understand that Amazon was loss making for the first 7-8 years, more than that. And even today, their majority revenue that makes Amazon comes from AWS and their digital services and not from Amazon.com, which is what they started out to do.
I think they are, the retail margins are very thin.
Very thin. So after that, logistics and all the backbones behind it, consumer internet is still not something that India has really cracked very perfectly, and we're still figuring out. So for a Cred to go to that scale and then start offering other things, See, there are like so sometimes people start disagreeing with concepts. Like you can definitely disagree with one thing that Kunal Shah says. You can definitely disagree with some statements. You can disagree with individual opinions of people, but you can't disagree with everything that they stand for just because of one opinion, which is what mostly happens. And I feel we are spending a lot of time today as Indian youth on all of this, which is like confusing people that okay, if I do this then this is wrong, if I do that then this is wrong. Sometimes it goes to an extent of fundraising is also in some cases very glorified, that people feel their success is associated to how much fund you raise. But there are instances like where people like Kunal Shah have come out and said fundraising should not be glorified, but he does it because there's a clear plan for cred. It might fail, but that's the risk of every startup, right? So I think all of this together, we are just very confused, and we are in that adolescent phase where we just have so much access to information. Someone needs to really like filter this information and push out the right things into I feel like the 20 to 30 year olds, so that we are like very focused on building the country up for all the technological benefits. Is like going to be a byproduct of that. And I just feel we are very confused at this point. Yeah.
I get very scared when somebody talks about filtering. Somebody should filter this,
Filtering, I mean like not about curbing free speech, but about like just being in a more directed manner that bro, at the end of the day, all that matters is what you want to do with your life. You do whatever you want to do with your life. Don't care about like what's going on there. You build it in the right way, and then things will move forward, right?
So just on that, is there a way to unconfuse like anybody? Maybe.
So I'll tell you something that's worked really simple, basic thing for me is me 1.5 years back versus now has been social media. That's why I'm like I'm very not only LinkedIn. That's because of work. Like now LinkedIn is more like a tool for work where I have to check it 1 hour every day to see if this is what is happening. I need to, because I have to run a business. It's not about this happening. Like my amount of influence because someone raised money has reduced a lot. Like this person raised, I have not raised, or this has happened that. So I feel like off Instagram, off Facebook, off any of this. Only like few small group of core friends that add value, and I think small things, at least for me, that work, this is given like genuinely so much peace of mind, like peace of mind to an extent that I'm not influenced by anyone like in a personal or professional manner, that I feel like more focused towards building the business. What is the core? These are the things these are 10 things to outline today, and then let's move forward. So I think I feel like that's why I brought up like the social media thing, because I see like a very personal change, even though it's hard to make that shift. People give this excuse of I want to stay connected, but then I'm like, bro, where's the time to stay connected? Like there's no time to stay connected to 30 people. There's a time you have, all of us probably have like 3-4 core friends that we can fall back on.
3-4, I mean, you're lucky, man. I have like one.
So maybe like one in the country, 3-4 globally. That's probably the number and if that is the case, you have WhatsApp, like you'll anyway stay in touch with them. I don't want to see where people are vacationing and what's happening. And I think that really gives you like a lot of stillness to then zoom out and think about what do you want to do, which I think has really unfucked a lot of parts of my brain.
I completely agree, because every time I've gone on Instagram, almost 9 out of 10 times I come out more depressed than, because I'll be working on some problem or I'll be editing my videos or something like that, and then there'll be some motherfucker with his hot fucking 10 girlfriends and he'll be vacationing in some Bali and all that, and you're just sitting there like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah, what am I doing now?
Why don't I have like 4 girls around me right now when I'm editing this video? So very vanity thoughts and all that.
I think it's just that moment I feel like it's, as a country. So this is like, again, there's been a lot of backlash for this on LinkedIn, right? Like for people and work hours and all of that. But I feel as a country, it's not about, okay, you work 70 hours, 80 hours or whatever. It's just about prioritizing one common goal that, okay, we are going to build really cool shit out of this country. And that takes working collaboratively and not pulling other people down.
Sorry, going back to China on that topic, right? I think China is very famous for that 996 grind, where they work 9 to 9 and 6 days a week.
Yeah, that was back then. Now they have a lot of.
Is it?
Now they have a lot of their restrictions and all that come up. But they did have that in their formative days. But I don't think we need that now. Like, again, this is the advantage of the technology, right? Like today you have enough technology to, let's say, learn from them and do things faster. That time they had to figure out things by themselves, make the mistakes and then learn. Today you have a GPT a production manager can sit on a GPT and like plan a full production cycle and not do that 9 to 9 to 6, whatever needs to be done. You can do that in 2 shifts. Again, with the human capital that we have, you can employ more people to do that 9 to 9. Do that as 9 to 4 also, like 9 to 4 a.m., 9 a.m. but do it in 3 shifts so more people are employed. That's still like a scope that we have. That's what, again, like a lot of that comes back to how are you training and educating people. For you to employ more of these people, you need to give them good quality education. for them to have good quality education, you need more opportunities, and for that to happen, the people giving those opportunities need to be educated. So it's like a
One more thing is I also feel like people who enter, I don't know, this is my sense that generally I feel like people generally have a negative sense of business as well. Like when people talk about organizations, right? It should be transactional. Okay, that is fair. But I feel like there is some sort of, this corporation is an evil. I'm working there, but it's like I'm working there because I have no choice but to pay my bills and all that. But they view like the kind of corporation as like an evil corporation. I don't know how pervasive this is, but I do get, sometimes when I talk to people, I do get that sense. Many people have openly, I'm just a slave, man, like, so stuff like that. I don't know how much of that results in like various things or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that'll be a very case by case thing. I don't think I can generalize that, because there will be people who are actually going through a shitty time because of the managers, right? That might be the case. There might be organizations that have very bad policies. I think if their priority is clear that I just want to pay my bills and I'm done, and then don't expect like the organization to be bad to you during the time of a promotion, because one person has worked their ass off and you have only worked to pay your bills. Obviously want to pick that person, which is where again with the result of that is why people are confused. So people decide that, okay, I only want to be a slave, I'm going to give my bare minimum 9 to 5. I'm a decent worker, I'm not going above and beyond, I don't have any agency, I'm not going to figure out ways to get better at my work, I'm going to do what my manager says. Where people get confused is at the end of 1 year, when your appraisals are due or when your promotions are due, when you are not promoted and someone else is promoted, be clear that I only did this and I'm happy. This is the confusion that I'm talking about. Then they'll go on LinkedIn and see like this guy got an appraisal, where did this guy get? Because bro, you have not done maybe what you meant to do, and that guy probably put in that extra effort. That's it. So that's the confusion. I don't think that is wrong. I feel there are situations where people feel like slaves, managers and all that. But what they do by saying this is just disregarding the people that are actually working their ass off. I don't think there's anything wrong towards saying that or feeling that way. Just don't disregard the efforts of people who are working that hard to gain that edge over you. I feel that is also another thing with the youth today, that in a way victimization, right? Like in a way, like, yeah, this is.
Are you actually seeing a massive behavior change between Gen Z and millennials? Or I'm guessing you're a millennial, right?
No, I'm a Gen Z.
Oh my God.
98, so I'm borderline. But people think like I'm not. People think I'm way older, but yeah, it's. I don't really see a lot of difference between millennials and Gen Z specifically. I feel all of us are just confused. So I don't. I think all of us are just confused. I don't think I see a lot of difference there, at least at this point. Yeah. But yeah, biggest problem I would say, like, yeah, coming back to our initial topic, is that I feel people being focused on their skills and it's high agency development and all that. Still, I think we have a long way to go, and automatically the gap with China or any of these countries, I think we can bridge over a 5 to 8 year horizon. Yeah.
I think on that confusing note, we'll thank you so much for taking the time,
Yeah,
and
sure.
really thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. And, yeah.